We all search for that spark which fuels our desire to fully engage in our lives. We look for the courage to experience moments where we can come alive instead of watching life pass us by. You're listening to the Front Row Factor, leaving fear and insecurity behind by exploring stories of top performers that are living life in the front row. Get ready to stand up, step up, and live it up with your host, John Vroman.
Hey, Front Row family, John Vroman here. Welcome back to another episode of the Front Row Factor podcast. If you're brand new to the show, I often get asked the question, how did this whole front row thing begin? So I've got to take you back to 2005 when I helped co-found a charity called Front Row Foundation. Now, this is an organization that creates front row experiences for children and adults who are braving a critical health challenge. What's really cool about the charity is it's not just about creating a day, it's about a lifestyle. You know, we often say this is a forever thing. It's about how we live every day of our lives. And in the front row, we're energized. We're in the moment. We're celebrating life. And so this show is about celebrating life. It's about highlighting guests that are living big and giving big and making the most of every day. We explore their transformative moments where they stepped from the back row as a spectator to an engaged, energized person in the front row of their life. And today is no exception as we're talking with my new friend, Chris Spealler. Now, I was introduced to this guest by Charlie Brenneman, who is episode number 30 on the Front Row Factor podcast. If you didn't hear that one, go back and check it out. But my new friend, Chris, was an individual competitor in 7 CrossFit games. He is an affiliate owner, which we explain what that is during the show, and a trainer for CrossFit headquarters who he teaches domestically and internationally. Now, he has helped grow the sport of CrossFit through competing and teaching since 2007. And currently, you know, he has an awesome online program, iconathlete.com, which is designed for individuals aspiring to compete in CrossFit. Now, this guy lives in Park City, Utah, with his wife, 2 kids, and their dogs, Oakley and Avalanche. Awesome names. So today I catch up with Chris from the gym before the day kicks off. In this conversation, we're all over the place. It's really fun, from CrossFit experiences to his business and to his biggest priority, which is his family. We talk failure and how to deal with some of life's most crushing blows. I ask Chris about the most transformative moments in his life. I find out what Chris says to himself when he's pushing the limits, you know, with the CrossFit. And we find out why Chris never wants to say in his life. We explore his faith and what role that plays. And Chris tells me about the power of the question, what's lasting? And this is one of my favorite parts of the interview. So ladies and gentlemen, enjoy my chat with Chris Spealler. Chris, welcome to the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Dude, this is going to be a treat for our Front Row family. And thanks for carving out the time. You're a family man, you're a businessman, and you like to stay active. So to give us the highlight reel, what's shaking in your world right now? What's good? What are you excited about?
I guess, you know, the past 2 years has been a big transition year for me. I went from competing in CrossFit to not competing. And as I've done that, a really good way for me to stay involved in the sport is just doing a lot of programming for athletes. I started an online programming called Icon Athlete, which has been really cool to help just a huge variety of people that are interested in competing in CrossFit. So that's been kind of the big one for me. I also work for CrossFit headquarters and teach at seminars really around the globe. So that keeps me busy as well. And amidst all that, just trying to find a balance of how to be a good dad and husband and still not get too carried away with work.
That's great, man. You know, for those people that are just listening on the podcast and not watching on YouTube, Chris, you lit up, man, when you talked about being a dad. That was cool. Yeah, I appreciate that. And I've checked out a lot of your stuff online, man. I'm a fan from afar. And one of the things I heard you mention this before too is that family is always a priority. You know, even if during seasons of your life you might be doing some other business activities, you know, you've always managed to keep your family a priority. And I just saw that in your physiology a moment ago. That was great.
Thank you.
So, dude, for those people who don't know, give us a quick breakdown. What is CrossFit?
Yeah, CrossFit, it really started, I guess, picking up steam in early 2000. It's a fitness program, but it's one that originally kind of picked up steam in the law enforcement and military communities, largely because it was known for just preparing athletes or those service members or people in general for anything. So this broad base of fitness, so they could go into training or combat or do their work and their job and be prepared for anything. And it started to pick up more steam in mainstream. In 2007, they had the CrossFit Games, which is basically like a big barbecue with your buddies. And then that grew really quickly from 2007 to 2010. They went from having it at basically a guy's backyard to being at the StubHub Center in LA. And then that has grown exponentially since then to where it's a pretty big piece of CrossFit with the competition. But what I think most people miss out on is that the competition is not CrossFit. 99% of the community are guys like you and I, a dad or a mom or, a grandpa that's going into an affiliate and just going there to get fit. There's a little bit of a disconnect there, but that really is CrossFit, is people that are just trying to get fit and live a better life. And it's very community oriented, which is really cool. And I think that piece has probably changed the face of the fitness industry more than anything.
Chris, when you say going into an affiliate, what do you mean by that?
So CrossFit, it's pretty cool. They don't have a franchise. It's not in the sense where if you go to one CrossFit, the other could be run very different. And that could be community, it could be atmosphere, could be the way that they program their classes. But affiliates are just where you could go to take a CrossFit class from a CrossFit trainer. And those are all over. You can find that easily on CrossFit.com and an affiliate finder map. And it's just think like a yoga studio, but for fitness.
That's great. How did you stumble upon this? What's your story of jumping in?
I actually found it through a friend of mine that was a Marine. I was his Young Life leader when he was in high school. And Young Life is just this big non-denominational outreach Christian ministry for just high school kids. And I was his Young Life leader. And he left high school and went into the Marines. And I bumped into him about 6 months later in California. And he told me, and this was in 2006, like, hey, man, you got to check out this CrossFit stuff, because he and a bunch of his guys were doing it. And I kind of sloughed it off like most people do. And I was like, yeah, I'll check it out. And back then, they didn't have any affiliates in my state, let alone a very few amount in our country. And I went online and found CrossFit.com, and I told my buddy, I was like, hey, I'm going to try this for 6 weeks and see what I think. And honestly, it just, it turned into never turning back.
Would you say that was one of the biggest transformational moments of your life?
What's funny is I think, like, as far as when I look back at a time of my life where it really was like a fork in the road, or really provided a great job for me and experiences, 100%. Like that moment of Chris and I talking and kind of finding CrossFit, experiencing it, how much I enjoyed it, leading to me to opening an affiliate, all that was life-changing for sure. But it wasn't life-changing in the sense of like who I was or what I enjoyed to do. Those things were already there. And it ended up just kind of being a really amazing outlet. And I was 100% in the right place at the right time. And I also worked really hard as well. And because of that, the experiences that I've had through CrossFit are things that I never, ever would have thought that I ever would have had.
Why are you so passionate about it? What is it that drew you in? Like, walk me through that mindset of when you're just saying, hell yes, this is it.
Yeah, I love sport. I wrestled in high school. I wrestled from the time I was 5. I started wrestling when I was a little guy, and then played other sports, all sorts of stuff growing up. But once I got into high school, really found myself drawn to wrestling, partly because it was kind of what I was better at, and also because it's just, for a smaller guy like myself, I felt like it was fair in the sense that I could, wrestle a guy my size. So wrestling really gave me this outlet. And when I finished wrestling in college, I remember walking off the mat and being like, oh my gosh, that was my last wrestling match like ever. There's no old guy wrestling club that you can go to. Sounds kind of creepy anyway. So I found CrossFit about 4 or 5 years later, and it just felt so much more like sport to me than going in the gym and just working out. I had done that, and I'm not much of a gym rat. So yeah, that's what's drawn me to it. That's what I love about it, is I feel like it gives people the opportunity to be an athlete, even though in their previous experiences, they may not have ever felt like that. And I love that.
So now that you're retired from the CrossFit Games, how are you fulfilling that part of your world?
I think a lot of it is helping others with the programming. That's been really cool. When I walked away from wrestling, I did a little bit of coaching, but it really didn't have much of a way to give back or help. Where with this, because I've just had some great experiences and because I can share those things with people through an online community or workshops or seminars that I work with HQ, it's been a really good way for me to transition and stay involved and kind of fulfill that part of things. But also, I think because I had been through that before, seeing the writing on the wall and knowing what it was going to be like was really helpful too, because it allowed me to do things like really rely on things like my faith and my family in order to have that kind of prop me up as I walked away from something that meant so much to me.
Tell us about your faith a little bit. How does that play a role in your life, and how does that show up each day?
I think it's one of those things that I think it's easy to act like you have it all together, and I definitely don't. I think it's a constant journey. But for me, I'm a Christian, and just the concept of the idea of having a relationship with Christ for me is really a grounding thing, and it's really a humbling thing, and it's also something that is contrary to so much of what I've done. Everything that I've done is very works based. Like if I do this, I'm going to get this. If I work toward this, I can be an All-American in wrestling. If I work this hard, I will win the CrossFit Games. Where the more that I learn about Jesus and the more that I read in scripture it's not like that. It's not based on works. It just is. That love just is. So that is a huge part of what I think, grounds me and helps me not feel like I'm missing so much with CrossFit not now being kind of taking a back seat and things like that. And then obviously family and things like that. I think looking at things that really matter and things that have like real purchase in our lives for long term. I have a feeling when I look back when I'm an old man, I'm probably not going to be as worried about where I stood in CrossFit, and I'll probably be more concerned about what I did with my kids and my wife.
I'd bet on that.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. I'm going to backstep just a minute from when we were talking about transformations in life, and I was talking about the transformation in CrossFit, perhaps.
Yeah.
What do you consider, Chris, to be one of your, and maybe it was that time, but what would you consider to be one of the most significant transformational moments of your life? It could be a moment, literally, it could be a minute. And for our community, we call that the back row to front row moment of your life. When you go from being a spectator, kind of watching life happen, to when you step up. And the front row, for us, the metaphor is one of being energized, being, super close to the thing that, it inspires you, that you want to be close to. The front row is sometimes messy. It's not always the easiest place to be. I mean, some elbows being thrown, people get a little territorial in the front row, but it feels like you're alive in the front row. And for me, that transformation just means we kind of step into the messiness of life and we start to transform through that process. Do you have a moment like that comes to mind when I talk about that?
Yeah, I think surprisingly, maybe not. It was in high school. I remember I was at a wrestling practice, and I had kind of been on this fringe of like, I'd never like a super confident kid. I just struggled with confidence a lot of self-doubt, and wanted to be really good at it, but I just didn't know. And my coach played a video, these guys at the University of Iowa, and it was their college wrestling team. And for people that don't know much about it, they're like basically like legends in the sport of wrestling and some of the best ever. And a guy, Dan Gable, who's one of the best wrestlers of all time, was the coach there at the time. And I watched this video of these college wrestlers, and I watched these guys training and doing stuff that was like, it just blew my mind how hard they worked and like their passion and drive. And I remember watching it and thinking to myself, like, holy crap, that's awesome. And it looked horrible. Like it looked miserable. The guys, it looked miserable, but I remember being like, that is awesome. And I want that. I don't ever want to say, what if I would have tried? What if I would have done it? And literally from that, like we watched the video and we went into practice, and that practice, I remember just working so crazy hard. And the kid that I was drilling with, he looked at me, he's like, do you work this hard every day? And I remember just saying to him, yeah, because in my head, I was like, well, yeah, I'm going to do that from now on. And for whatever reason, that video and watching those guys really transformed, I think, my perception on, yeah, just how to chase after something and being maybe at that time, maybe a little less afraid to fail. And as I got older, I learned that that failure is not a bad thing.
I want to get to failure here in a second. That's a big one. Before we do, though, I think we have something in common here, Chris, which is great. So you've watched the movie Rudy?
Yeah.
Okay, so in 10th grade, I'm 4'10". I weigh 85 pounds.
Yeah, man.
I mean, I wasn't growing. My parents took me to go see an endocrinologist. They did a bone scan. I had the bone age of a 9-year-old. I was 16. I was driving a car. And I was the smallest kid, not only just in high school, but probably in the junior high as well. And I'll never forget, like, I started going through some tough times in life, a lot of self-doubt, I think, lacking major confidence. And my dad gave me $5 and said, go rent the movie Rudy. And I had the same experience that you just talked about when I watched Rudy.
Yeah.
And that became sort of that was a turning point for me. With that $5 and that movie was a turning point because I saw somebody who was shorter. They were doing something positive with it. They were fighting through. They were persistent. And that's something I was lacking. I was using it as an excuse, not as a reason to push harder or a reason to succeed.
Well, that's really cool.
I felt like I could totally relate when you were telling that story.
Yeah, man.
So talk about failure a little bit. What have you learned about it? I know there's a lot of people listening right now and they're going to fail today on something. What advice do you have for them? Share some wisdom that you've taken over the years of facing it and battling through.
Yeah, it's funny. I just did another podcast about it like a week and a half ago, and the whole thing was kind of wrapped around this concept of failure and how it's not a bad thing. Like, one, it's normal. You know what I mean? Like, hey guys, that's normal. It's not like not everything we do is going to succeed. So I think sometimes taking some of that pressure off of ourselves and thinking like, oh my gosh, this has to work. And if it doesn't, I'm a failure. Well, not really. Like, how many things do I think about, especially on the business side of things, have I done that I've tried and have failed? But I've learned from that and thought, okay, well, what can I do to make that better? What can I try differently? And then along with that, like, I think what most people don't know about me, and whether they know, my background well or not, everything I've ever set out to do, in a lot of people's minds, I've failed. I've never reached the goals that I've set for myself. In high school, I wanted to place in the state tournament in wrestling. Never did. I won one match, but that's it. And then I wanted to go to Division I college, which I did. And I wanted to be a Division I All-American. 5 more years, and I didn't do it. I was 2 matches away from being an All-American. 5 more years after school, I find CrossFit and start to get into the CrossFit Games, and my goal is to win the CrossFit Games. Never did. I got 3rd place at the CrossFit Games. So I think for a lot of people, depending on how they look at things, they view that as like, some might view that as like, hey, well, Chris is a failure. Chris failed. But I don't look at it like that at all. I think if we don't set goals, if we don't try to work toward things that are maybe even not that it's unrealistic, but maybe even seemingly outside of our reach in a little bit because of our self-doubt, then I think we're going to miss a huge amount of growing and learning experiences and opportunities that otherwise, if we're like, you know what, I'd just rather not fail, I'm too worried that it's not going to work out, I would never, ever have.
Chris, you've got 2 kids.
Yeah.
Your oldest is 6, right?
Yeah, he is.
So how do you currently, or what's your plan for teaching him about failure, or how will you try to instill the value of, and I don't know what it would be, a persistence or overcoming some other definition you might have?
That's really cool because I find myself kind of processing through that on a daily basis now. And a great example is yesterday we were up skiing and there's this run called Silver Queen. And in the beginning of the year, we went up there and it was like gnarly. Snow was blowing sideways. It was super windy and it was like you couldn't see well. And we tried to ski down it. And that was, back in like December. And from that moment on, my little man was like, Dad, Silver Queen, it ain't happening. You can see it in his face where he's like, Oh, no. And yesterday, super sunny, snow was good. And I had him and my daughter up there and my wife. And I was like, hey, buddy, it's like, this is one of the last days we can ski this year. And I just said, I'm telling you, I think today might be the day. And I was like, even if you don't make it down, I don't care. I was like, I just want you to try. Just be confident, buddy. If you just try, even if it doesn't work out, that's all right. I was like, either way, we'll go down and have a hot chocolate when you're done. And I think for me, I just want to encourage him in that sense, like just go into it confidently, try it. And like, Dad, I don't care if you don't get it. I don't care if you fail. Like, what I care about is that you gave it everything you had. And he did it, man. He skied down the whole thing and he was all fired up, and Dad, are you proud of me? Dad, do I get a toy, Dad? I'm like, no, you don't get a toy. Like, the reward is that you did it, buddy. So it's a lot of things like that.
Your son's hanging out with my 6-year-old son. That's great. Yeah, as soon as he does something, he's like, how much do I get for that? How much did I earn? I'm like, you earned my respect. That's cool, man. That's cool. What are your kids teaching you about life right now, Chris?
Oh man, they're so different. Like they're so different. My son is like pretty mellow, and my daughter is a little firecracker, and she's awesome. But I think patience is probably a huge one. Like learning how to be patient. Learning, I think as a parent, you find out really quickly how selfish you really are. That's another one. But I think also it's just really fun to watch them go through things that I remember, like the self-doubt or the hesitant piece. Like, I remember being like that as a kid and feeling overwhelmed by something and then the sense of victory. So I think there's a lot of things going on there now, but I just know I don't want to miss it. I don't want to look back and think that I missed it.
Yeah, that's really good, man. That's really good. I'm asking partially because my brain right now is in a space. We're creating this dad's retreat for the fall, and
Cool.
I just keep thinking about what's important to me. And the way it came up was I've got all these conferences I'm going to. I got conference for business. I've got a conference where I'm going to grow personally, or whatever it might be. But then and I've got these personal adventures that I take with my friends. We did a men's retreat that was just a getaway with the guys. I was like, why have I never had a dad's retreat? Why, as one of my most important roles in life, why haven't I done this? So I start thinking now about, well, what's important to talk about as a dad? What are we struggling with, and what are we learning, and how are we going to feel years down the road? And that thought really resonates with me about, it's about being there. That's a great place to say you're going to fail a lot as a dad,
Yeah.
for sure. I remember somebody gave me advice one time. They said, you will mess your kids up. That's not a question. Like, you're going to mess them up because you're messed up. But be there for that. Be there for that messiness and learn from it together. And that's the best thing that you can do.
That's cool.
You achieved quite a bit in your life at different stages along the way. I think it's really cool, man. I think you've inspired a lot of people. My neighbor, 2 doors down, is a CrossFit fan. I was like, hey, man, Chris Spealler? He goes, yeah, of course. I was like, hey, he's going to be on the Front Row Factor podcast. He's like, oh, that's so cool. So you've inspired people. My neighbor has been inspired. People ask you a lot of questions. What's a question that you wish people would ask you more often?
That is a good question. Gosh, no one's ever asked me that. I don't know. I think one of the things maybe where we are like in the CrossFit world, really like any athletic piece and probably most people, right, is like what most people don't ask. And I think it's because it's kind of like this like, oh, like we have to have it all figured out, or no one struggles with it. Is most people, some do, but most people don't ask like, hey, do you ever struggle, mentally with like self-doubt, or if you got injured, like what's the self-talk that goes through your head, or when you're in a competition and things get tough, or you do fail, what goes through your mind? A lot of us, I think, walk around, especially in athletics, not kind of showing those cards because you feel like it's a weakness. And the reality is, I think most people, probably most people in general, but most people at like a high level of athletics, in my experience, we're all head cases. We're all, trying to keep it together. And I think most people look at like the physical things. Hey, what do you do? What's your training program? And how do you do that? And what's your coach like? When really the other side of that most people don't talk about is, hey, like, where's your head at? How do you get confident? How do you stay calm when you're out there? And I think those are less commonly asked questions than, you know, how'd you get so strong?
That's right. Yeah. So how do you keep your head right?
I think kind of goes back to, it's probably a really individual thing, but for me, it goes back to a lot of that, the faith piece. And I think most people, if that's like all they have, that's generally where their identity lies, right? So if CrossFit or if work, if work and my performance at work is all I have, and my performance at work is tied into who I am and my self-worth and my value, well, when that doesn't work out, we're kind of screwed, right? But for me, if I know that I have, a relationship with Christ that is not based off of works, or it's not based off of my performance, and I have a rock solid, awesome, supportive wife, and I have a 6-year-old and a 4-year-old at home that don't care what place dad gets, those are the things that help me stay grounded in realizing that, you know what, at the end of the day, I'm going to compete to win. And that's why I'm here, because it'd be silly not to. But if it doesn't work out, I have things that really matter in my life that are kind of like we talked about earlier, supporting you, holding you up, when those other things that feel like they mean so much and feel like and when they do, like when I didn't win the CrossFit Games or when I didn't qualify for it one year, it was heartbreaking, man. It was devastating. But I can't imagine what that would have been like had I not had that relationship with Christ and my family and things like that.
How long were you devastated for? And let me frame why I asked that question. I remember years ago, I went through a bad breakup with a girl, and I remember I was crushed. I called my buddy and I was like, hey man, when you broke up with your girlfriend, like how long were you feeling this way? And he's like, and I was expecting the answer to be like, probably 3 to 5 days. And he goes, I was messed up for about a year. And I was like, a year? I don't have a year. Like, dude, I cannot make it through the next hour, let alone a year. How long would you feel that you didn't qualify for a CrossFit Games, let's say?
Yeah, that was hard, man. That was really hard. But also at that point in my life, I think that because of like just where I was in my headspace and things like that, I was able to shift gears relatively quickly. But it was pretty crushing for about 3 months, like pretty heavy, and then once I could do something about it, and once that season kind of came to a close, it started to feel like those feelings subsided. But yeah, I've had times in my life where that, like the CrossFit Games, that was 3 or 4 months. And I've had times where like years in college with things that happened with wrestling, that just didn't seem fair. And there were like political decisions and me not wrestling on the mat, but having to weigh in and wrestle with the team. And like, I mean, that lasted for 3 years. I think it's okay to be there.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's talk about routines a little bit. Think about your daily routine. How at the end of each day, Chris, do you celebrate the day? Maybe a dinner time tradition or something you do every evening. How do you look back and celebrate the day?
Yeah, I think I just try to shut down. That's one of my biggest challenges now, is with like all the things that I have going on. And just because of my personality, I can be pretty driven, and I have a hard time finding balance between work and family. And if I'm not working, I feel guilty that I'm not working. If I'm not with my family, I feel guilty I'm not there. So what I've been trying to do recently is just at the end of the day, I leave the gym and I make sure that I have things set up, what I need to get done taking care of for the day. I have my next day set up, and I just leave my laptop. I leave all my stuff at the gym so that when I go home, I can just be home. I can just be present. And that's hard. That's not always easy to do. But that routine has been really helpful, because then I can do things like, go to the park with my kids and not worry about having to crack open the laptop and do more work or do this or that. And that small little routine there allows time for, I think, the routines that you're talking about that I really haven't had much of, because I've been always, back and forth between work and family so much. And so now I look forward to when I go home, just being done and being home.
And that makes sense totally. I mean, I'm not a fitness pro like you, but that's where when you push the muscle, it's when you're resting it that's when it grows. Is that?
Yeah, you got it.
That's what I've heard. So I think that's a very similar concept just with our mindset, right? It's like, that's when it grows.
Yeah.
That's when we let it heal and build up for the next day. That's cool, man. I like that. Do you have any dinner time traditions with your family? Anything that you do each night at dinner?
Not really. We try two things: try to get our kids to actually eat
That's the tradition.
that, and try to keep the TV off as best as we can. But yeah, really, I think it's just a matter of trying to be with one another. It is with life. It is. And I think just the way things are now, it's just hard, turning things off, shutting down, but nothing other than that, just trying to be with one another.
Yeah. Dude, I have a friend who really has it together. I mean, super successful business guy, just world class at so many things. And I was at his house for dinner and he has 3 kids and it's chaos. Kids are running everywhere. They're doing, they're doing handstands on the table. They're screaming. They're picking up the phones. It is literally chaos. And the whole mission is like, how do I get my child to eat 3 bites of the healthiest part of that meal?
Awesome.
I think anybody that's got young kids would totally relate to. That's just, it's almost like it's frustrating as all can be. And it's also hysterical when you start thinking about all the things that, that happen around that space. Anyway, I'm smiling because I'm just going through the whole Rolodex of memories there.
Yeah.
Chris, what's some of the best advice that you've received on any subject matter? Just best advice in the last 12 months of your life.
12 months of my life. I don't know, because I feel like so much, I think some of it is just like comes from my friends because I put so much pressure on myself with work, and like I just want things to be successful, and I want things to work well, and I care. I'm really invested. And some of that is just some of my friends telling me like, hey, some of that stuff you just don't have any control over, man. Like you can put all that energy and effort into it, and some of those things you just don't have control over. So don't take it so personally, which I think is really easy for me in my line of work, is running an affiliate. Like it's very community oriented. So if someone doesn't want to continue, it feels real personal. And same thing with the Icon Athlete stuff. I put a lot of energy and effort into it. So if someone doesn't want to continue, I feel like it's real personal. But learning that like, hey, these things, it's don't take it so personally has been a helpful thought.
Can you tell us a little bit about the Icon Athlete?
Yeah, it's just online programming. CrossFit's grown a lot, and a lot of people are very interested in competing in CrossFit, even at just like local competitions. So you can get as crazy as the CrossFit Games, which is kind of like the Olympics of CrossFit, but all around people have like throwdowns, and there's affiliates, or like look on like a garage games type thing where people that just work out in their garages get to do that, and it's grown a bunch. So Icon Athlete is just a place for people to go for programming that's geared toward competitive CrossFit. And there's a couple different programs that people can follow, some a little bit lower volume and not quite as hefty as others. But it's just a resource for people to go to. There's a lot of free information on there under some of the tabs where they can check out some videos and things like that, where I'll post what I call like a weekly geek and have it just be a helpful video tip, all the way to signing up and following the program. That's, again, been a really good transition for me, and I enjoy that. Even though that's not my world anymore, as far as like how I train and what I do, I really enjoy helping others in it.
Is that the Icon Athlete, is that a ideal place for somebody to go if they were just getting started with CrossFit?
Probably not. It's one of those things where I would suggest if someone just wanted to check out CrossFit, I would tell them to go almost like, this is going to sound maybe bad because no one likes shopping for a car, but like shop around, go to affiliates close by and check it out. Like see what it's like. They'll all have different signups and things like that, but see what it's like. And then Icon Athlete is a great place for people. Some people just work out in their garage, they don't have any guidance with programming. So that could be a really good resource for those people. And then as they start to kind of get into the affiliate model and check things out, if they want to compete, then that's probably something that would be a good resource for them.
That's the space, yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Great. Perfect. What are you most proud of in the last 12 months?
I think part of it has been the Icon thing has been really cool to see that grow and the effort that I put into that. I think learning to like adapt in my work, I think has been really cool because we're doing some different things at our affiliate in Park City to help create growth and opportunity for more people there. So those are all pieces that, even though like I don't know if they're still going to work yet, I found that I enjoy looking back and thinking about what I've learned through those processes.
Chris, I'm going to go a little heavier on this question.
Yeah.
How do you process the idea that this ride ends for all of us, that tomorrow is guaranteed to nobody?
Yeah. I think that's another thing that nobody talks about, right? It's like we all know the ride's going to end at some point, but it's like we act like it's not. And I fall into that boat too. I think we get so caught up in life that we sometimes forget that it is not guaranteed. But I think ultimately, for me, it kind of goes back to a faith thing where it's like, this is such a small snapshot, a small glimpse of like what eternity, which really is now, will be. It's just like a small phase, a small piece of what the rest is going to be and what I believe is truly meant to be. And, when that day comes. But also, I think, just like we said, making sure that we put our value in the right spot, like what's lasting. I read a cool book or a section of a book and it talked about, just this idea of putting a post-it. Imagine putting a post-it on things that are lasting and on things that are not. What do we think about things that are lasting? And the reality is, it's like the relationship that I have with my family. You know what I mean? And then when I think about outside of that and all the stuff that we pursue outside of that, like the house, okay, that's not lasting. The new truck that I want, that's not lasting. You know what I mean? All those little things that we chase and we pursue, that stuff doesn't go back in the box when we go in the box. So,
wow.
Yeah. And that I think has been a really cool way to help me on occasion when I remember that stuff, think about like where my time's allocated. It's like, okay, what's lasting? What goes back in the box when I go in? And none of it's the material stuff.
Chris, what I think is so cool about what you're documenting about your life, and I believe heavily in documenting our lives and that each life is worth documenting. It's a core pillar of our charity, Front Row Foundation, where each recipient, children and adults, when they go on these live events, we videotape and we take pictures. And we create a big photo book for them, hardbound, hardcover photo book, and then a video for each person. Everybody gets one. It's not just a promotional piece for the world. It's literally for the, recipient and their family members. And I love the idea that we all have this story to tell. What I think is so cool about what you're doing and what you're up to, and this type of work that you're doing, is that by creating a website, by writing your story, by creating this online community, these are things that while who knows what happens with your community, right? But that stuff will always be there. Your kids will always be able to look at what their dad built. They'll always be able to go and see the pictures and the videos and the interviews. They'll watch this one day. Your kids
For sure.
are going to watch this one day.
That is crazy. Yeah.
That's insane. Like they're going to learn about their dad. This is lasting. This year when I'm writing my book and I start to get a little lethargic around the topic, I start to procrastinate. I think, if something happened to me in 6 months from now, if I put my energy into this book, man, this is how my kids will know me. They'll read this book and they'll know the best of their dad. Like I have that responsibility for my children to be able to share with them what I feel is important, my experience of life. And dude, I think that's just so cool. The idea of what's lasting, really, I've never heard it put that way. And I love that.
Yeah, that's cool.
That's awesome, brother. Really cool. Let me ask you some questions. Gut reaction. All right. So I'm going to challenge you to go for one word or one sentence only, if possible. If you want to expand, no problem.
Got it.
All right, gut reaction. All right, take a deep breath, get centered.
Ready.
One book or documentary that you think should be mandatory for everybody to experience.
Oh, man. One book or documentary.
We could even say movie if you want.
Yeah.
Maybe it's the video you talked about earlier.
Yeah, that. And maybe it's just because I think I've been watching it with my kids. I love Narnia.
Narnia, yeah.
Narnia is awesome. It's a good story. I think we forget like some of the fairy tale stuff. It's kind of fun.
Do you love that part of having kids where you get a chance to like watch the kids movies again and like fully be present?
Oh yeah, I'm gonna take my kids to Zootopia. No, like I'm gonna watch.
That's right, man. That's so cool. Do you have a personal mantra or a favorite quote?
Yeah, I would often say to myself when I was in CrossFit and things just got really nasty, it's there. That's it. It's there. Just believing that whatever it is that you're going through, like, you have the ability to get it done. It's there.
Oh man, that's really good. And let me just expand on that for a second, make sure I get it. I've heard somebody say all you need is within you now. And is it that kind of idea that what you need will be there?
Basically, yeah. Yeah. When that self-doubt creeps in, it's like, no, it's there. I've worked hard for it. I earned it. It's there.
That's awesome. That's great. In the end, Chris, when it is all over, what do you want to be remembered for?
It just popped in my head. Like, maybe nothing. Like, I just want my family to remember me as being there. And if that happens, maybe no one else will remember anything else I did. I don't know.
Well, dude, I think that's awesome. So you want your family to remember that you were there.
Yeah, just dad was present.
What live event would you most want to see front row?
Oh, it's got to be and even though I'd never done it, like, it's got to be some awesome event in the Olympics, like the 100-meter sprint, for the track, something like that, something at the Olympics. It has to be.
Yeah. And then what's one thing that you would encourage the front row family here to go do in the next 24 hours, to live big?
I think we often forget adventures just outside our front door. And, like, whatever that looks like, I think it's just getting out of the routine. Get out of the routine and do something that is sitting right in front of you and is maybe something you're a little bit intimidated to do. And don't be afraid to fail. Doesn't matter what it is, but just something outside the routine.
Yeah. Great, Chris. Thank you. Any final parting words for the audience? Anything that you want to share that we didn't get a chance to talk about today?
No, I don't think so, man. I just really appreciate the time to talk with you. And yeah, hopefully people can have some sort of inspiration, or at least understand, probably all of us are in the same boat, and it's okay to fail and have self-doubt. And I think we all learn through those processes every single moment of every single day.
Yeah, that's really great. Thank you for taking the time for us, man. I want to take a second, Chris, and I want to celebrate your life, buddy, with our community. If they were here, they'd all be giving you a standing ovation for your time today. I want to thank you for really going after it in your life. I want to thank you for inspiring people like my neighbor who inspires my kids. So when I say literally, Chris, you have helped my children. That's not a stretch. By you inspiring my neighbor comes to my house and he's a better version of himself and he inspires my kids. Dude, we see him doing CrossFit in his garage. I mean, I'm not kidding you. So, dude, I want to thank you and I want to celebrate your life for really being such a positive impact in the world, being vulnerable with us today and just being the real deal, man. I think that people can relate far more to your failures than they can your successes. I think people are going to get a lot of energy from this conversation today. I hope that people will check out your online coaching programs. I hope they'll check you out. Is it chrisspealler.com? Is that the best place to send them?
And check that out, or iconathlete.com, either one.
Iconathlete.com. And we'll link to all that in the notes. And Chris, I just want to thank you again, buddy. I wish you all the best. Enjoy time with your family. I'll look for the ski photos online and we'll chat down the road, man.
Thanks, John.
Okay. Cheers.
Thanks for listening. To get more Chris, catch him on Instagram. We'll link to that in the show notes. Catch him at chrisspealler.com. That's SPEALLER.com. Or his website, iconathlete.com. ICON athlete.com, for people who want to be competitors in the CrossFit world. Hey, Chris's encore episode is out in just a couple of days. That's questions from you, the community, directly to our guest. If you want to ask those questions down the road, go to frontrowfriends.com, join our Facebook group, and post your questions there. I'd encourage you to share this episode with one person today. Every time I read a book or listen to a podcast, I'm asking who would benefit from this, and I try to pass it on. A way to add value constantly to your front row, the people in your front row of life. Many of you have been asking about our live events. So we've got two. Our Speaker Trainer Experience event is a live training for speakers, trainers, facilitators, presenters, or people that want to do this. It's an awesome event that sold out the last two times. I partnered with my good friend John Berghoff of the Flourishing Leadership Institute. If this sounds like something that would excite you, go to speakertrainerexperience.com and you can join the waitlist there to be notified when we open up the next event. And hey, for all you dads out there, this was an awesome chat with Chris and involved a lot about parenting and being a family man.
And I love investing in myself in all different kinds of ways to grow my business and personal growth. The one thing that I never found was a dad's retreat, which I think is one of the greatest callings in life, to be an awesome dad. And so I believe that this was an area that, I wanted to scratch my own itch, if you will. I wanted to fulfill a need. So with 20 years of event planning experience, I said, why don't I just throw an event for dads who want to come together? So this is an invite-only event. It's a small group of guys. If that sounds appealing to you, to spend 2 days with like-minded guys that are just awesome human beings, then email us. Just go to frontrowfactor.com/contact and reach us through the website and ask for more information, and we will pass along some details from there, and you can apply to become part of that event. And finally, thanks for the love about this show. We've got over 130 5-star reviews on iTunes. And if you want to leave us some love there, go to frontrowfactor.com/review. And that's a quick link that takes you directly to the iTunes review page. Thanks so much for listening. Can't wait to have you back on the next show. Until next time, keep living your life in the front row.
That's all for this episode of The Front Row Factor. To discover more simple and effective ways to lead a fearless front row life, visit frontrowfactor.com and subscribe to John's 4 Minutes in the Front Row, where he shares quick stories from real-life experiences. Thanks again for joining us today. We hope our show inspires you to live big, give big, and experience life to the fullest. See you next week on The Front Row Factor.